The Sunspears, defenders of Elona, protectors of peace, and the guardians of the sands. Today we're delving into their history and lore. So hello, welcome to my channel. Here we'll learn the lore and stories of the world of Tyria. Please follow along into Elona as we uncover the full story of the Order of the Sunspears. As always, you can find the full lore on the official Guild Wars wikis. Let's begin. When Elona had no guardians. Long before the rise of Joko, long before the Order of Whispers began gathering secrets in the shadows, and long before the names of Cormyr and Talcora became legends throughout Elona, the land was a far harsher and more dangerous place than most people would recognize today. In those ancient days, Elona was divided among countless tribes and rival powers whose conflict seemed endless, and while warriors sought glory and rulers sought influence, it was often ordinary farmers, merchants and families who suffered the most whenever war swept across the land. Villages could be destroyed simply because they stood between two armies, and many people lived their lives with little certainty that peace would last beyond the next sunrise. It was during this turbulent era that Queen Nadije rose to prominence. Looking across a land filled with promise yet burdened by constant violence, she understood that lasting peace could never be achieved unless someone was willing to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. Rather than ruling through fear or conquest alone, she gathered the finest warriors she could find and united them beneath a common purpose that was greater than personal ambition. Among these champions were the renowned hero Sogolon the Protector, whose deeds would echo throughout Elonian history for centuries to come. Together, these warriors formed the Sunspear Guard, an organization dedicated not to enriching itself or seizing territory, but to protecting the people of Elona wherever danger threatened them. Under Queen Nadije's leadership, the Sunspear Guard helped bring stability to regions that had known little except warfare, and as peace gradually spread across the land, the people began to see the warriors as something more than soldiers. They became symbols of security, justice and hope, representing the belief that strength existed not merely to defeat enemies, but to safeguard those who could not defend themselves. Although none could have known it at the time, the ideals established during those early years would endure for thousands of years, and survive some of the greatest disasters Elona would ever face. The Order endures. The centuries that followed brought enormous changes to Elona. As dynasties rose and fell, rulers came and went, and entire generations lived and died beneath the desert sun. Yet, while kingdoms changed around them, the Sunspear Guard remained steadfast in its mission, adapting to each new era without abandoning the principles upon which it had been founded. As their numbers increased and their influence spread across the land, the organization gradually evolved from a royal guard into something much larger and more important. No longer serving only a monarch, they became guardians of Elona itself, answering to their own code and remaining independent from the political struggles that often divided the region. Eventually, the Sunspear Guard adopted a new name that reflected this broader purpose. They became the Order of the Sunspears. This transformation was more than a simple change in title. It marked the moment when the Sunspears fully embraced their role as protectors of all Elonians, regardless of province, social status or political allegiance. Whether conflict erupted in Istan, Korna or Vabi, the Sunspears answered the call because their loyalty belonged to the people, rather than to any single ruler. Throughout the centuries, they repeatedly proved the value of that commitment. When the devastating Scarab Plague struck the Isle of Istan and threatened to spread across the region, the Sunspears organized evacuations, established quarantines, and worked tirelessly to protect those who had nowhere else to turn. Even after the immediate crisis passed, they remained to help rebuild communities that had been shattered by loss and suffering. These actions revealed the true nature of the Order. The Sunspears were not simply warriors trained for battle, they were guardians who understood that protecting people sometimes meant fighting monsters and invaders, while at other times it meant offering aid, leadership and hope during moments of catastrophe. The First War against Joko. In 860 AE, Elona faced a threat unlike any it had encountered before. as the undead ruler known as Joko launched his campaign of conquest across the region. With an army of awakened soldiers who felt neither fear nor exhaustion, Joko appeared almost unstoppable, and many feared that all of Elona would soon fall beneath his rule. The Sunspears were among the first to oppose him. Although they fought with tremendous courage, the battles were costly, particularly in Vabi, where Joko's forces inflicted severe losses upon the Order. Yet, despite these hardships, the Sunspears refused to abandon their duty, continuing to struggle even when victory seemed increasingly unlikely. Their perseverance was rewarded when a great hero named Turai Ossa rallied the armies of Elona against the undead tyrant. The Sunspears joined his campaign and fought alongside countless other defenders of the realm in the war that ultimately culminated in the Battle of Jahai. There, Joko was defeated. Yet even in victory, a troubling truth became clear. Joko could not be permanently destroyed, and so he was imprisoned rather than slain, sealed away beneath the desolation, while the newly formed Order of Whispers took responsibility for ensuring that he remained contained. For many, this seemed like the end of the story. For the Sunspears, it was simply another chapter in the long duty to protect Elona. The Shadow of Nightfall. More than 2 centuries later, a new crisis emerged that threatened not merely Elona, but all of Tyria itself. This danger came in the form of Varesh Ossa, the ambitious war marshal of Korna, whose growing devotion to the fallen god Abaddon placed the world on a path toward catastrophe. The first warning came from a young woman named Talcora, who overheard secret conversations revealing Varesh's intentions. Although her claims initially seemed difficult to believe, further investigation confirmed the horrifying truth. Varesh was actively working to bring about Nightfall, an event that would weaken the barrier separating Tyria from the realm of torment. Recognizing the scale of the threat, the Sunspears acted swiftly under the leadership of Spear Marshal Cormyr. They launched an assault against Gandhara, the moon fortress, hoping to stop Varesh before her plans could progress further. At first, the operation seemed successful. Then everything changed. Varesh unleashed demonic forces in support of her army, overwhelming the attackers and turning a promising offensive into a devastating defeat. The Sunspears were forced to retreat, and Cormyr herself was captured and blinded during the battle. For many organizations, such a disaster would have meant destruction. For the Sunspears, it became a test of endurance. Hidden within vast cave networks and supported by new allies, including the Order of Whispers and the Veldrunner Centaurs, the Sunspears slowly rebuilt their strength while continuing their pursuit of Varesh across Elona. Although they fought bravely, each victory seemed to reveal another obstacle, and every step forward demanded sacrifices that few could have imagined at the beginning of the war. Eventually, the pursuit led them to the edge of the desolation, where they faced a terrible dilemma. The only being capable of teaching them how to cross the sulphurous wasteland was none other than Joko himself, who had been freed amid the chaos surrounding Nightfall. The choice was deeply troubling. The Sunspears knew exactly who Joko was and remembered the devastation he had once inflicted upon Elona. Yet, they also understood that if Varesh succeeded, the consequences would be far worse. Reluctantly, they formed an alliance with the Lich King. In exchange for his knowledge and assistance, they helped restore his position and reclaim the Bone Palace from Morganite control. Armed with the means to continue their pursuit, they pressed onward into the desolation and beyond. Despite their efforts, however, they could not prevent Varesh from completing her final ritual. The barrier between Tyria and the realm of torment was shattered. Nightfall had begun. The Sunspears and their allies entered the realm of torment itself, undertaking a journey that would eventually lead them to Abaddon's gate. There, blessed by the 5 gods and guided by the blind but unwavering Cormyr, they confronted the fallen god and brought an end to his reign. In the aftermath of that victory, Cormyr ascended and became the new goddess of truth, order and spirit, ensuring that the world survived. Yet, the cost of that salvation would not be understood until much later. Joko remained free. The fall of the Order. For 100 years, Joko patiently rebuilt his strength while the people of Elona celebrated the heroes who had saved the world. Though many believed the threat had passed, the Lich King never forgot the humiliation he had suffered, nor did he forgive the Sunspears for becoming symbols of hope that eclipsed his own reputation. Rather than attacking them directly, Joko chose a far more effective strategy. He attacked their unity. Through promises of power, wealth, prestige, and immortality, through awakening, he gradually convinced some Sunspears to betray the ideals they had once sworn to uphold. These traitors became the first members of the Mordant Crescent, and turned against their former comrades with ruthless efficiency. The damage was catastrophic. Strongholds fell, networks collapsed, trusted allies became enemies. Little by little, the order that had protected Elona for centuries began to fracture. In those dark years, the greatest symbol of resistance was Talcora. Having become Spear Marshal, she continued fighting against Joko despite overwhelming odds and the gradual collapse of the organization she loved. Again and again, Joko attempted to silence her. When he captured her, he cut out her tongue. She continued inspiring resistance through her writings. When he took her eyes, she remained a powerful symbol of defiance. Even after awakening her, he discovered that her spirit remained beyond his control. Unable to break her will, Joko ultimately left her trapped within an immobile awakened body upon the Yanur Plateau, where she remained imprisoned but undefeated. Her suffering became one of the most tragic stories in Elonian history, yet it also demonstrated the extraordinary resilience that had defined the Sunspears since the days of Queen Nadije. The sun rises again. Although Joko worked tirelessly to erase the Sunspears from history, he never succeeded completely. When he outlawed their use of spears throughout his kingdom in an attempt to destroy their symbol, surviving Sunspears adapted by reforging broken spearheads into daggers and developing new methods to continue their struggle. The weapon changed. The mission endured. Generations later, during the events surrounding the return to Elona, surviving Sunspears emerged from hiding and began rebuilding what had once seemed lost forever. Old traditions were remembered, new alliances were formed, and the renewed Sunspear presence slowly began to take shape. The Order would never again be exactly what it had once been. Too much history had passed, and too many sacrifices had been made. Yet the ideals that had inspired the first Sunspear Guard still survived. Across thousands of years of history, through plagues, wars, betrayals, gods and tyrants, the Sunspears remained guided by the same principles that had defined them from the beginning. They believed in valor without arrogance, strength without cruelty, loyalty without blind obedience, and sacrifice without expectation of reward. Above all else, they believed that the people of Elona deserved protectors willing to stand against any threat, no matter how powerful or terrifying it might be. That belief carried them through every triumph and every tragedy. It carried them from Queen Nadije's first warriors to Turai Ossa's campaigns, from Cormyr's struggle against Abaddon to Talcora's unbroken resistance against Joko. Empires rose and fell, heroes came and went, yet the Sunspears endured because they were never defined by a fortress, a ruler, or even a weapon. They were defined by a promise. A promise to be the unbreakable wall that shelters the innocent, the unstoppable spear that strikes down tyranny, and the unwavering light that continues to shine even when darkness seems certain to prevail. This has been the lore and story of the Sunspears. I hope you enjoyed this video. The Sunspears is one of the coolest factions in the game for me, since I love their history and their principles. I also love any type of deserting games, so yeah. With that said, thank you for watching this video. Please like and comment something you thought was interesting or something that I missed. Also subscribe to not miss future lore content in this format. Now take care, and I will see you in the next story. Goodbye.